this anti-satellite test that happened and the impacts that that has on our ability to be in space. Somebody needs to tell me what they were thinking.
The shuttle got hit too. The shuttle would come back with holes in the radiators. These things do happen, and these are the small millimeter things that you can't see.
Exactly. Even if you don't lose the ISS in a kind of gravity movie kind of way.
Right.
You know.
What Russia just did has made Elon Musk absolutely furious.
Houston, I've lost visual, Dr. Stone.
Russia has fired a rocket at a satellite, creating thousands of debris that are now floating around in space. In Russia's defense, the idea was to conduct an anti-satellite test, or an ASAT, the purpose of which is to shoot down objects in space. By shooting down one of its own satellites, however, Russia has also put SpaceX at risk, which has thousands of satellites working within 48 miles from the debris. This is giving birth to criticism against Russia's anti-satellite test, and Musk is not holding back. Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX, is known for clapping back at Russia in the past, and it appears that he has done it again. So, what are the ramifications of Russia's actions, and what does Musk have to say about it? Let's find out in this video. After Russia destroyed one of its own satellites by shooting it down with a rocket, it created a complicated situation. The satellite blew up to form thousands of debris that are now floating in space. The newly created cloud debris is circling between 275 and 323 miles above our planet. Meanwhile, SpaceX has thousands of satellites orbiting Earth from about 341 miles, which is not too far off. Not only is the action itself being questioned, but it has also reportedly infuriated Elon Musk. The fact that SpaceX has more than 1,000 satellites within just 46 miles of the swarm of space junk is not great news for the private space agency. It turns out that Russia's weapons tests created more than 1,500 pieces of space junk, which is a significant enough number that could cause serious complications. By firing a missile at one of its very own satellites, Russia successfully destroyed it but opened the door to a number of problems. The impact created thousands of little pieces of debris which are now threatening the 7 astronauts aboard the International Space Station. According to US officials, the strike was reckless and irresponsible. The State Department of the US has also verified that the debris in issue was from an obsolete Russian satellite destroyed by the missile. NASA Administrator Bill Nelson told the press that the entire event was hard to believe, calling it unconscionable. Mr. Nelson went on to say that it is unbelievable that the Russian government would perform this test and harm not just international astronauts, but their own cosmonauts that are on board the station. The list also includes 3 astronauts on China's space station which were made to face similar risks. Nelson went on to explain that the astronauts now face 4 times higher risk than they normally do, and that's just based on the debris that is big enough to track. It is being believed that there are hundreds of thousands of smaller pieces that aren't big enough to be detected from Earth. The undetected debris can become a problem or, as the NASA administrator explained, any one of which can do enormous damage if it hits in the right place. Unfortunately, some of the debris is likely to fall into comparable heights as Starlink as well. For those unaware, Starlink is a network of satellites that Elon Musk's SpaceX placed into space to broadcast internet connection to Earth. Jonathan McDowell, who's an astronomer at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics, remarked on the topic as well, telling insiders that the debris might smash into Starlink's satellites as it spreads. However, we'll get back to that later. The fact is that Starlink's network is made up of about 2,000 satellites, so the effect of any individual loss on the overall network would likely be small. SpaceX, unfortunately, did not respond to a request for public comment on the matter. But it's no secret to those who know the basics of space communication that even a splash of paint can do major damage when orbiting at 17,500 miles per hour, which is about 28,000 kilometers per hour. However, that is exactly what the speed of the satellites, and in turn, the debris would be. NASA Mission Control has said that the heightened hazard might continue to delay the astronauts' science investigations and other tasks. Since last week, at least 4 of the 7 crew members have landed at the orbiting station, but the rest are still delayed and at extra risk due to the debris. As if the most probable situation wasn't daunting enough, a worst-case scenario for Russia's actions is even more concerning. According to the worst-case scenario, if the satellites end up getting hit with a bigger piece of debris from the Russian detonation, the results would be catastrophic. If a satellite gets struck by one of the bigger pieces of debris, it could entirely smash the satellite into thousands of more pieces. That, in turn, could end up triggering a minor chain event. This means that if a bigger piece of the destroyed Russian satellite came into contact with Starlink satellites, the problem will worsen manifold. More debris will be created as a result, which could end up doing much more damage than expected. On the other hand, the best-case scenario can be quite a bit of a relief to hear. In the best-case scenario, SpaceX can just get lucky and none of their satellites would get hit. After all of them are currently situated at least 48 miles away from the debris. However, the idea that not a single satellite is going to be affected is perhaps a little optimistic, just like the worst-case scenario is somewhat pessimistic. In the circumstances such as this, it can be interesting to look at the most likely scenario. Mr. McDowell, the astrophysicist mentioned earlier, has had some interesting comments about the event. He said it's more likely that a single satellite or two get hit by the debris, but unless the debris is large enough to cause a chain reaction, it shouldn't affect SpaceX as a whole. A European Space Agency official also expressed their concerns regarding the matter. According to them, other missions are going to be affected by the debris as well. The kind of missions that go into this altitude, which is now contaminated by the test, are mainly Earth observation missions and also telecommunication missions, said Dr. Holger Krag, the head of the European Space Agency's safety program. It's making spaceflight more difficult. We already have a very contaminated environment. We're already doing many cruise avoidance maneuvers, even without the Russians' anti-satellite test. Now that test comes on top, and that means extra risk and extra cost for everybody. The statements from NASA and the European Space Agency talking about the Russian anti-satellite test do not come unfounded. A number of experts in astronomy have indicated that any event like this is more than likely to compromise a number of missions in space, including communication and observing. Fortunately for SpaceX, their Starlink satellites have an automated avoidance system that allows the satellites to automatically move out of harm's way whenever a larger piece of debris is sensed nearby. It does appear that this system is in place for unexpected events such as this one. However, there are limitations. For starters, the system in Starlink satellites rely on data from US Space Command, which essentially tracks the bigger objects from the ground. For now, Space Command has relatively little idea of where the debris is as the number of trackable debris continues to increase. The event has, after all, created at least 1,500 trackable pieces of debris that are bigger than 10 centimeters, and unfortunately, that number is likely to grow as the tracking continues. As far as Russia is concerned, there was no immediate statement from them about the missile strike. However, it clearly impacted the Russians on board the International Space Station. Once the threat became evident early Monday morning, the 4 Americans, 1 German, and 2 Russians on board the ISS were told to quickly take cover in their moored capsules. They spent 2 hours in the 2 capsules, ultimately emerging only to have to seal and reopen hatches to the station's different labs on every orbit. Understandably, it produced a tough scenario for all astronauts. Do you think Russia made a terrible mistake by firing a rocket into space? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below.